From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. This episode is powered by Swyftx, Australia's top-rated crypto exchange and proudly homegrown, just like many of the athletes and business leaders we feature on Scoreboard. Now let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Stuart Randall, Managing Editor, Digital Video, Audio and Social of ESPN Australia. Stuart, great to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Stuart, I've been looking forward to this podcast, a number of reasons, but the main reason is I've talked a lot about the way sport is being consumed and the way sport is being, I suppose, from a social media point of view. Not when I was growing up, was nothing in and around that, but I'm keen to hear your thoughts, first up, about how the landscape is changing through social media and how people consume sport differently.
Wow, it's that's a very, very short question for a very big answer, I think. The landscape has changed so much over the last few years. I think back to even doing these things like doing podcasts remotely. I'm thinking back to pre-COVID when I first joined ESPN in 2018, how we did things and how different the landscape was then. And I think that it's a real democratization of technology has completely changed everything now in our industry, and it's created opportunities, it's created challenges. It's really leveled the playing field where your big brands like ourselves or Fox Sports or your free-to-air networks and their digital handles are playing in the same space as individual creators, as individual podcasters, as a Dan Does Footy or Bloke at the Bar or things like that.
Scoreboard, of course. Yep.
Of course, yeah, Scoreboard, of course. All have the opportunity and all have the chance to reach as many people, and in many cases more people than some of the big brands, simply because of this democratization of tech. I was thinking over the weekend around how things have changed in my time in the industry, and I think the phone is the biggest change that we've possibly had. When I started working 25 plus years ago, I took a plastic handset to a press box in England to plug in and then read out copy to someone sitting in an office. And nowadays I could take my phone and I could live stream the game that I'm watching in front of me, and I could go live with my own opinion straight after the game, or I could use an AI tool to transcribe the coach's interview afterwards. And the change we've had in such a small amount of time is quite incredible. And it has just opened the world of possibilities for any person to become a sports content creator in this instance. And it's exciting. It's kind of scary, but it's a really interesting world to play in at the moment.
I'd love to go back to those days in the UK. I spent a bit of time in the UK. I remember the BlackBerry. Remember the BlackBerry?
I do, yes.
Yeah, that was sort of around 05, 06, 20 odd years ago. And I really aspired to have a BlackBerry at some point in time in my life. But back then it was what everyone did. It was like email on your phone. Get out of here.
It was a real status symbol, the BlackBerry, for a while.
It sure was. And your time in the UK, with the sport over there, the Premier League, all these big deals that were going on, sort of shaped the next 20 years of sport. You want to go back to that era and talk about a little bit some of the learnings that you came across at the time?
Yeah, sure. I'm born in the UK and lived the first 28 years of my life there before I moved to Australia. So my original media career was there, and I always wanted to be a journalist when I was growing up. I always wanted to work in sport. Once I realised I wouldn't be able to play for the England football team, I realised that I would have to be there in another capacity. So I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a journalist, and I went to university and studied journalism. And I was halfway through and realised I actually just want to be doing this. I want to be at games. So I actually dropped out of uni at that point and worked in a supermarket Monday to Friday, and managed to get a job writing 150, 200-word match reports for a sports news agency in London in the 1998-99 season. And they would send me to, second division football matches or Premiership rugby matches, and I would take my phone in my bag and get on the train and get off and plug it in at the press box and write out in pen and paper my 150 words, then dictate it down the phone to a copy taker. And I did that for a year, and it was a great learning. You learn how to write tight, quick, accurate copy because you had to always file on the whistle. There was no spell checks or anything like that. I didn't have a laptop or a phone to be able to do these things for me. And then eventually I kind of pivoted. At the end of that, I needed a full-time job. I couldn't keep working on the meat and fish counter of my local supermarket Monday to Friday. So I got a job at a TV station as a runner, someone whose job was to get coffee and erase VHS tapes and peel stickers off things and things like that, and gradually kind of worked my way through the ranks there to become a producer and director, and then finally ended up at Sky Sports working on the Premier League there, which was the biggest learning ground of all, I guess. It was a very tough place to work at the time, and it was probably in their heyday, 2004 to 2006 I was there. And it was a tough school, but you learnt so much about standards and quality of your work, and accountability as well, I guess. And that really held me in good stead for the rest of my career.
And in terms of the blurriness of the lines between sport, as a job, as a profession, and enjoying sport, and then sport as a business, how have you managed that through your career?
It's because you love it, you never turn off, which is probably the hardest thing. I think about this weekend. I've been a bit sick last week, but still at home doing some work things, and then you try to switch off at the weekend, and I'm sitting there watching the West Tigers game yesterday, or flicking over to the Wallabies
game. Good game, by the way.
Time.
The West Tigers game was a cracking game of rugby league.
I mean, we're back. I'm a Tigers fan, a long-suffering Tigers fan, so we are back, baby.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. You end up you never really fully switch off when your work is also your passion. So it's that double-edged sword that it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome that I work in this field that I just love so much, and has been part of my life since I was a kid. I've always loved sports. Soccer was, being English, soccer was my big one, but I've been here for nearly 20 years and I love AFL and NRL and everything else and that comes with it. But it is a challenge sometimes to look at things slightly dispassionately and not continually critique. When I worked in television, I was a lot worse. So I was an executive producer at SBS for 12 years, and I would always be looking at things through the broadcast lens and go, why did they do that? Why did that bit of music? Look at that mistake. And my partner would always say to me, why don't you just sit and enjoy it? I'm like, well, I'm looking at it. I'm just seeing why they did that. So as I get older, I try to remove myself a little bit more, but it is hard sometimes because it's such a, you're always thinking about it. I'll listen to a podcast and it'll be a sports business pod, or it'll be, the Bill Simmons pod talking about NBA. And it's not really about, it's not really about that kind of lean back experience. I'm still kind of leaning forward a little bit when I'm listening to these things or watching something. But I am trying to get a little bit better.
You mentioned before about the sort of democratization of technology and the information available for content creators, etc. Do you think there's a bit of content overload, like you don't know where to start or don't know where to begin, and you could just sit there all day 24/7 listening to content and not do anything?
There is an absolute flood of it, but the thing that amazes me, and I'll give a little case study from what we've done at ESPN, is when I joined there in 2018, one of my roles was to increase our presence in local sports. We are known for being US sports broadcaster, NBA, NFL, etc. And we wanted to make a bit more of an impression in local codes. So we've put a lot of effort and a lot of time and resource into doing AFL content. And we've taken it from a user base maybe of 300,000 users consuming AFL content in 2019 to about 2.5 million now. So we've done a really good job of that. But I was amazed thinking, why are people consuming AFL content on ESPN when there's so much out there? And you realise that there is such a voracious appetite for that content. You realise that no matter how much is created, people are still consuming it. And it is going back to the whole point around phones. It's people don't switch off. I talk about not switching off, and I'm kind of in the industry. Yep. People who are just consumers don't switch off either. They are second screening while they're watching the game on TV or at the pub, or they're on their commute. The old days of picking up MX or the Evening Standard in London when you're on the train or on the bus is completely gone. Everyone's on their phone. Everyone's looking at what happened last night. Everyone's reading something or listening to something and reading something at the same time. So there is so much content out there, and it is really hard to cut through. But on the flip side, people just seem to want more and more and more. Which, from our perspective, you've got to think how do we try to stand out in the crowd? How do we try to make our voice heard? And at the same time, you're at the behest of the algorithms of the tech companies. So it's a really challenging space. But I think, like I said before, it's an exciting one because you have opportunity to try things. And yeah, I go back to my previous one on TV. You try something on TV and it fails, and it's a bit tougher to do to get back from that position if you have a show cancelled or a show has terrible ratings. If you put a piece of content up on the internet that doesn't go particularly well, you just do another one 10 minutes later and try and make it better.
Interesting. Yeah, no. You touched on ESPN there in terms of the brain in Australia, people thinking America, and then you're starting to do AFL content. How have you gone about educating the user base, the consumer out there, going that ESPN does a bit more than just American sports?
It's one of the challenges we've got. And I mean, it's a good position that we're in because we're so known for something, and in a time where brand recognition is quite hard for people, and there's a lot of turbulence in the market, I think to be known for something is a real positive. I've always said that we're big in niche sports and niche in big in this country. So we do, we're the biggest player that there is in basketball and NFL, and UFC is one of our big things now as well. But we're trying to get a foothold in the sports that matter to people in this country, AFL, NRL, cricket, etc. One of the advantages we have is we own Footy Tips. So we actually have an audience there of 1.5 million tippers on local sport. So we've really been trying to tap into that. We've been trying to educate people that when you're doing your tips, we offer them more content in the app there. If you'd like to be smarter about how you're tipping, read this article or watch this video or listen to the Footy Tips podcast. All these little things, these little nuggets that we're trying to drop to try and entice people to spend a bit more time with us, to engage with us a little bit more, to click on one more link. And we've been trying to do that. And then we've tried to take this position in local sports where, we're not beholden to anybody. We don't have rights for anything. We don't really have official formal relationships with governing bodies or other media groups. So we can just be honest about things. We can just say them as they are. So we tried to do that. We tried to take some of that ESPN ethos of storytelling and almost like a frankness in the way we cover a sport and bring that into AFL and to a degree NRL. AFL's been our focus more recently. And like I say, we've had some real success with that. We've got a couple of podcasts on the go now. We just brought Mason Cox on board to do a YouTube first show for us as well. And we've managed to make some real inroads into transforming some of that Footy Tips audience into regular ESPN users, which has been really good.
You're managing editor, digital, video, audio, and social. There's a few buckets there. How have you gone about sort of, I suppose, focusing on those buckets and one's better than the other and whatnot, and at time allocation, etc.? How's your brain thinking about that?
Well, I think content is probably the word. But
yep.
It's funny. We're in an industry where we're still very siloed in the way we look at things sometimes. And I'm talking broadly here, not necessarily at ESPN, but very broadly, we think this is TV, this is digital, this is social, this is video. And in my mind, it's all just content. It's the differentiation is the platform you're watching it or listening to it on. But it is all content. And so it's just about tailoring the right piece of content to the right audience on the right platform at the right time. You can have the best possible piece of content, and you think this is gonna absolutely pop when we put this on social, and it just doesn't. And there could be a million reasons for that. It could be the algorithm, it could be the time of day, it could be somebody else put something similar just beforehand and they got pushed up. A lot of the time you just don't know. And I think anyone who says they know how the algorithms work and that this doing the content in this way will definitely work is lying, really, because no one really does know. We're all learning at this. We're all still trying to find our way, and we're all still making mistakes. And I think that's one of the best things you can do is you can try things and you can fail, and the failure isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just another way to learn and another way to get some experience in thinking, right, that didn't work, so let's try it somewhere else, or in a different way, or at a different time. When I think when I started, the industry in general had a feeling of, we're going to take this piece of content, we're going to put it on television, and then we're going to put it on the internet, and then we're going to put it on social, and it was the same piece of content. It hadn't changed. It was cut in the same way. It just looked exactly the same. And that one-size-fits-all approach is still being done in some places, I think, and it just doesn't work. The audience is too smart for that. The algorithms are too intelligent for that as well. So there isn't one bucket that's more important than the other from a content perspective or engagement perspective. Obviously, there's revenues attached in different places, which can dictate the priorities you give sometimes. But it's all about forming a connection with the audience. You can have the best production values, you can have the best intentions of how you want a piece, but if it doesn't connect, if it doesn't emote, if it doesn't make the person on their phone feel something, there's no real point in what you've done.
And to my a question now around, you've got sport, let's call it your basketball, and then you've got various leagues underneath the basketball, as an example, the NBA and then the NBL. And then within that, you've got the teams, and then within that, you've got the players, and they're all producing content. Again, they're all kind of like showcasing different types of content around the place. How does ESPN work with that, I suppose, and they're doing something and you go, oh, actually, we were going to do that, or vice versa, and how does it all play in?
Well, I think we have partnerships with certain competitions, with the NBA, WNBA, NBL, WNBL, and we want to work with them when we can, but also there has to be a little bit of a church and state thing there as well. Sometimes we're going to have to publish something that's not going to be they may not like, or it's a controversial take or things like that. And we are a news organisation ultimately at our heart, and in our ethos from our history of ESPN. So we have to approach that in a quite an even-handed way. In terms of the amount of content that's out there and the different types of content between them, we do see ourselves a little bit as that kind of one-stop shop, because we know that fandom is not. It's not siloed. Fans aren't generally just Golden State Warriors and nothing else matters in their life. We know that there is, in Australia, I think we did some studies a couple of years ago that before COVID, the average person was interested in about 4.6 different leagues or teams around the world. In 2023, that had gone up to 7.8. So there's been an explosion of interest in sports and leagues and competitions around the world. The environment we're in, where you can basically watch any competition in the world at any time on your phone, means that suddenly people are interested. And so that puts us in a really strong position, I think. We've got I personally think a best-in-class app in terms of live scores and news. And if you are a fan of, say, the New York Yankees, the Jets, Collingwood, and Melbourne Storm, we can give you pretty much all you need on all those teams in one spot. And I think that's a case for so many of the competitions that we look after and so much of the sport that we do. We focus very much on the sports and the leagues and the competitions that the kind of younger fan base are interested in. We're lucky we have a young audience with ESPN. And we really focus on that, and we really try to push as much content that appeals to that kind of demographic. And we know that people will go to their athlete podcasts or they'll go to the club sites, but kind of going back to the points before, there is so much content and there's so much appetite for content that people will still come to us. And we've seen the evidence of that. We've continually growing our audience on and off platform over the last 3 or 4 years.
You talked about demographics there, and you talked about your audience. How do you kind of get that? Is that through the login to register, just follow teams, etc.? Because obviously on platforms, some of these big tech companies may not want to share that data, or do they?
Yeah, well, we have certain analytics tools in-house which give us that data, particularly around social media. We can see very granular details around who our social media audience is, where they're from, what their age is, what they're interested in. And there's other tools that we can use which give us a really good insight into that. And then we use focus groups as well around these things, and we do regular surveys and check-ins to see kind of the health of our brand, I guess. And we've got, we know that the sports that we cover are appealing to a younger demographic in this country. Basketball is, it's the fastest growing participation sport. It's the second biggest in the country, and we are the home of hoops in Australia. So we know that is a really good position to be in, and a really strong position and a strong foundation for us to grow in. We know that NFL is, Super Bowl day. I think Andrew Webster said in the Sydney Morning Herald a few years ago, Super Bowl is now the young person's Melbourne Cup day. Everyone takes a sickie, everyone's off, everyone goes to the pub at 10 in the morning.
On a Monday morning.
On a Monday morning, yes. And we ran a Super Bowl sickie campaign for the last 2 years, which Stephen A. Smith did for us. So there's that's where I think we've got quite a strong position, that we have this young audience and we're continuing to serve them this content. And the beauty of something like the NBA and basketball is it never stops. We are here 3 weeks after, two and a bit weeks after Game 7 of the finals, and we went straight into draft and went straight into Kevin Durant being traded.
And the trades, and the draft, and every day everyone logs on and goes, what happened last day? Oh, log on to, yes, I'm giving you a plug here, log on to ESPN to check out what trades have been happening.
Exactly. And we're in this 365-day a year NBA economy. Summer League games started yesterday. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. That even caught me by surprise. So I think, are we already into Summer League straight away? And you've got Aussies playing in Summer League. And that's the other part of this. The NBA is so aspirational for Australians, I think. We've had number one draft picks. We've had people go. We've had a number of lottery picks. We've had a number of NBA champions. Got another one this year. And you see the pathway from the NBL through to the NBA. And I think that recognition, I think that Aussies on the big stage is still something that people here really like and they really kind of appreciate. And I think it's a little bit like Premier League soccer probably was in the 90s here when you had Harry Kewell and Mark Viduka. There's almost a sense of pride in following those competitions because look at the Aussies doing well.
Yep.
Tim, yeah, exactly.
Lucas Neal, yeah.
And I think you're now getting a little bit of that with US sports. Luke Longley, obviously the trailblazer initially, but you see what Dyson Daniels did last season. You see Josh Giddey having a resurgence in Chicago, and you see Aussies going through the draft. We had 4 Aussies picked in the second round this year. So there is definitely, it's that continual interest, and it's that thread between these kids that were playing at the NBL at John Cain Arena and on a Friday night. You watch them on ESPN, you see them in the draft, then you see them in Summer League, then you'll see them eventually make their NBA debut. So we're able to tell the story from the start all the way through to almost to its completion. And yeah, I think it's a pretty cool opportunity we have around some of those sports.
When it comes to, we talk about the Australian consumption of US-based sports, where's that trend been? And do you think, the democratization, or the access, I suppose, to follow teams and follow leagues over in the US has sort of changed grassroots sport participation somewhat?
I think it has, and you can see that. My daughter played basketball here in Sydney, and there were times when games would be cancelled because they couldn't find a court because there's so much interest and there's so many people playing it. I think the beauty of something like basketball is it's a little bit like soccer. You need the ball, and that's about it. You can kind of do it anywhere, and it's such a simple sport to play. And in a world where I think parents are starting to get concerned around the impacts of high contact sports like rugby, both rugby codes like AFL, when you talk about concussions, I think you're seeing more and more kids being guided into playing different sports, like basketball, like soccer. And you see as well, the other aspect of it is the culture. They love wearing basketball jerseys. They love wearing the Jordans. There's a whole culture around. It's that intersection between sport and culture that basketball and the NBA in particular does so well. And you see music as well is part of this. And it's people don't really support in basketball anyway. They're not really following teams anymore. They're just following their stars. They're following LeBron. They're following, KD. They're following the next generation. Will be Shea. It'll be, all these players that they just love, and they'll get their jersey. And then when Luka moves, they'll get the new Luka jersey.
Yes,
it's that fandom that is created through clips on TikTok, through dunks they see on Instagram. We know that we're not getting 15-year-olds coming out and sitting and watching a whole NBA game. That's, we understand that. But as long as they're consuming the NBA via, our TikTok moments of Luka doing something, or, they're clicking on the alert that Shams has just done that Durant's part of a 7-team trade and things like that. We know that there is such an industry around the NBA now that is really captivating to younger people. And that's translating itself into how they actually want to play the sport themselves. They want to wear the jersey and they want to try the 3-point Curry shot from the corner, or they want to go and do a big LeBron dunk or something like that. It's a very aspirational kind of sport, and it's one that can be almost easily translated into the actual game itself.
You mentioned about following players. The access that people have to the players is a lot different when we were growing up. It was sort of watch them on TV, and you might glimpse them on the street sometimes, and you may even, get an autograph. Nowadays, you can follow people behind the scenes on social media and see that they're normal human beings, broadly speaking, that they go to the coffee shop or they're in the gym, etc. The connection, as you talked about previously, between a regular punter watching sport and an athlete is closer than ever, I think. Is it getting closer and closer and closer? And what do you think is the future of, I suppose, a relationship between a fan and a player?
It is definitely getting closer. My slight concern is when it crosses the lines. I mean, you see the stories of what some people say in DMs to players. A player misses a kick at the end of a footy game and the abuse they receive in DMs. And I think there may be a point where it contracts a little bit and players are a little bit more guarded about what they do. Like, if you lose a game, they may not come on and actually post something. And I think that would be a very bad place for us to get into, but it's probably emblematic of the way certain aspects of social media have gone in society in general, where it seems to be around extremes a little bit. So I really hope that doesn't happen. It doesn't discourage athletes from being honest. We would, in the media, we'd love athletes being honest. We continually get the sanitized version of them, official media opportunities, and you often only get the real version of them from their own social media channels. And you see the amount of stories that are written by certain outlets, just basically looking at someone's social media feed. So I really hope that we don't get to the point where people close up too much, because I think there's too much of that. There's too much sanitized appearances from athletes in the media, particularly in this country. I look at America as being very different. I think they're a lot more raw. They're a lot more honest, and there don't seem to be quite as many guide ropes, I think, around them in NBA and NFL in particular. Whereas I look at here and you see, Jack Ginnivan does a celebration in a game and he's criticised by all and sundry, and there has to be an apology, or the Swans have to come out and do an apology because somebody did an action on the field or said something after a game or did a post. And I think we need to let people be people, and we need to let people have a personality, because if the game just becomes this vanilla, all that people ever see is 18 robots going around in different colours for each footy team.
Yep.
What's the point? It's about connection, as I said. It's about emotion. It's about feeling something, and we shouldn't prevent people from being the people they are just because they happen to be playing for a footy club. Obviously, there's boundaries on what you should say and decency and respect and things like that. But if somebody is just doing a celebration like a Jack Ginnivan, then let them go for it.
Yeah, that leads me to the next question around the types of content that resonates well every now and then, and there might be a blurry ground that someone does something controversial as opposed to an amazing goal, which I'm sure, or amazing play, which I'm sure gets some good likes and good shares, etc. But then maybe someone does something funny, or maybe someone does a little bit controversial, or maybe there's the big biff that happens and everyone goes, "Oh, mate, check this out," for instance. How do you see that and some data and going, actually, just the play of the day doesn't make it anymore?
It's funny the things that work and the things that don't work. Like I think the biggest clip that we've done on TikTok this year, and we've had an amazing year on TikTok. We've done over like 100 million views for our channel. We did a knockout from a UFC fight night in Shanghai, in a women's flyweight fight, and it did something like 12 million views just for that clip. And it wasn't like it was a major fight. It wasn't a world title fight. It was somewhere on the undercard, and it wasn't even the most spectacular knockout. But it was, there was just something about it that resonated, and it just went crazy. And I think we got a bit fortunate that there weren't many other people putting the same content out at the same time, so our one kind of caught fire a little bit. We've had some good success. We've just been showing the Australia West Indies series on Disney Plus this last week and a half, and we've had some really good success out of some clips from that as well. Particularly a lot of the controversial ones when the third umpire's involved. What was this? And we positioned it as asking the question. Was this out?
Yep.
And we're giving people the opportunity. We're actually. Yeah, and it's not engagement for engagement's sake. This is a legitimate part of something that happened in the game, but all we're doing is saying, what do you think? And by giving people the opportunity, by actually opening the door, people actually do want to give an opinion then. We did a clip from I think it was from like a country footy game, and it's a ridiculous mark a couple of weeks ago, and that went crazy. It was the same thing. We're like, is this mark of the year, or is this better than so-and-so's mark in the AFL? And again, it opened the door for people to just have an opinion, and people love to put their own opinion forward these days, and there's a million platforms where you can do that. I mean, you look at ESPN in the US is all about opinions a lot of the time now. Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee and all the shows we have.
There's an AFL commentator that's got into a bit of hot water with a couple of clubs as well this year. Yeah,
there is. Yes, there is maybe similar, trying to go down a similar path a little bit there. But it's that kind of thing. It's hot take it has got negative connotations, but I think people do want to put their own opinion out there, and they do want to hear others. And if they disagree with them, they disagree with them. But it's that emoting, it's that connection, it's that feeling something. And if that's something they're feeling is disagreement with that, then that's still relevant. So in terms of like the types of content that work and what we see, it can literally be anything sometimes. It is just how you frame it and how you get that connection. Don't just put it up because you think, oh, that's a great goal or great try, and hope for the best. How you frame it, how you present it, how you position it, that's almost as important.
Like in terms of, is this goal of the season, for instance? Because everyone sort of says that when they see a goal or a catch in cricket. Oh, that's the catch of the year.
Yep.
And then next week they go, that's the catch of the year. You're like, oh, okay. So you put it up, go, is that the catch of the year? People go, oh, for sure. No, this one's better,
Yeah, it's those kind of things. You can't just put something up and hope that it's going to work. You've really got to work hard these days to actually frame it, position it, to make sure it does kind of catch fire and get shared. Because the biggest metric from a social media point of view is shares. So someone has seen it and they want to tell their mate. It's like going to a game back in the day and calling someone on the way home, or going to the pub and going, did you see that goal earlier on today? This is the modern day version of that. It's, or like when you watch something at the weekend when you're at school and you go to school on Monday and go, did you see this? Now it is, click that share button straight away, tag your mates in, all those kind of things. That's the real measure of success on some of these things.
Do you have some funky metrics like, shares to clicks to likes ratios, etc.? There's some acronyms that people don't know about.
I have a social media lead who lives in that world. We've got a social media tool where we can go to any kind of level. We can look at engagement per share, per click, per platform on a Wednesday in March, and
between
compare
the hours
it to
of 2
like
and 3 p.m.
This is why I think one of the great things about leading a team is you make sure you get good people around you, and you get experts, you get subject matter experts there. And I leave those kind of things to him and say, just give me the exec summary here. Just give me the one pager on what's working and what isn't.
Yep.
Because there are so many levels you can, because there are so many levels you can get to in social in particular. and you can look at so many different things, and you can decide. You can put something out because you want this to get shares, or you want this to get comments, or you want this to get engagement, or you want this to get reach. And again, if there's sponsors involved, the sponsors may have a different imperative as well. So you position things and you present them slightly differently in that respect as well. For me, it's when I look at a website metric, I'm thinking I want people to spend time with us. Time spent is the most important.
Okay. Not shares and then time spent, right? So two important metrics.
Yeah. Time spent on website is the biggest indication for me that we're doing a good job, because I don't want someone to see one story, click the link, spend 20 seconds scanning it, and then go somewhere else. But if they spend a minute with us, if they spend 90 seconds, if they click on a second link, if they get to 2 minutes, if they click on a third, that's success, because we've got them in the environment and we've kept them in the environment. There is so much out there which is clickbait is used as a term kind of widely in the industry. And you don't want people to just click on one thing. What's the point? That's drive-by traffic. It's fast food. There's no nutrients in it.
I haven't heard that before. That's a good one.
It is. It's like that. It's going to the drive-through, and you'll have it, and at the time you go, that's great, but then you'll drive off and you'll go home and you won't think about it till the next time. Whereas, we want people to sit and we want people to enjoy their meal, and maybe have a little bit more of that and a little bit more of that, and think, this is great, I'm going to come back here. When we know that every publisher will get drive-through traffic, they'll get a bit of the fast food stuff. That's natural. And as you kind of grow your audience, you do get a little bit more of that. But if we can convert some of those people that are in drive-throughs to actually park the car and come in, that's what we really want.
Excellent, Stuart. I'm going to ask you about your favourite all-time sporting moment. It's a question I ask my guests sometimes, and it throws people because there's a fair few in their heads, and they're like, which one's been my favourite? So your favourite all-time sporting moment, Stuart?
This is one I was actually working on as well, so it kind of works on a few levels for me. I was working for ITV Sport in England for the 2003 Rugby World Cup in Australia. And I was the producer with the England team for that tournament. And
I know where this is
obviously
going.
England. I apologise.
It was a great game.
I apologise only a little bit. And so I was fortunate enough to be pitch side with a reporter for that entire World Cup final, and Johnny Wilkinson's drop goal winner. And was standing alongside Johnny as we got in for an interview, and then we were in the dressing room after the game, and Prince Harry came in and John Howard came in, and there was the trophy, and it was just the culmination of an amazing 7 weeks. 7 weeks where I think in Brisbane for the quarterfinal against Wales, England were losing badly at halftime.
Epic game. I was there. I was in that one. I also went to the one against Uruguay when you guys won 100 and something to something nil.
I remember the Wales game, it got to half-time and we stood up to go back to the media area, and we actually thought for a moment, oh, crap, we may actually have to fly home tomorrow. We hadn't planned that. We hadn't thought that England wouldn't beat Wales. We always assumed that they would get to at least the semi-finals. So there was this moment of realisation, oh, God, this could all be over now. But the rest is history there. And to be there and see what was a moment of sporting history, and to experience that, it's my home country winning the World Cup. It was quite amazing.
Yeah, in Australia too, obviously, with the fierce rivalry as well that's happened over the years. But what a tremendous game of rugby that was, and Elton Flatley on the buzzer as well to get to extra time. And then that quarter final you talked about, I remember Shane Williams was the winger from Wales, just twinkle toes.
He was, yeah.
And just scored some amazing tries through that tournament. And now we've got the British and Irish Lions over here as well. Are you getting into that?
I am, yes. That was the glory days of rugby, I guess, in 2003. And I think there's a few green shoots around rugby at the moment, but the Wallabies will need to step up significantly from what we saw yesterday against Fiji, where they were, I think, extremely fortunate to win is probably the best way to put it. I think, the Lions will go into this heavy favourites, and Australia have got a lot of work to do.
Yes, they do, and they got the bickies against Fiji, but the Waratahs gave the Lions a bit of a test, and the Lions have got a pretty decent schedule. They got them provincial game after provincial game, so you never know what might happen with that. Stuart, the scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life which is pretty vivid, and it's something which you go, I remember that, and it was pretty clear at the time, but then from that, life kind of changed somewhat.
Yeah, I guess like one of the defining moments of my life is I was actually, when I was younger, my family and I'm an only child. We actually emigrated to Australia when I was 10 years old, and unfortunately, when I was here, my father died about 6 weeks after we'd moved here, and we ended up moving back to England as it was just the easiest kind of thing to do. We just needed the support networks around us and things like that. And so I always think about, obviously I always think about that moment. It's a very vivid moment. And as you get older, you realize how those kind of moments have shaped you a little bit, and how your life and your personality and your behaviors have been molded by some of these things that happen. And like, I'm a father myself now to two kids, two Aussie kids, and as I've mentioned on the previous one, I've kind of ended up back here because I met my partner in South Korea in 2002, working on the FIFA World Cup, and she's an Aussie, and we ended up doing a distance thing for a while, and then she came to London, and then she wanted to come home in 2006, so we did. So I kind of feel that it's a bit of a full circle moment. My dad wanted to move to Australia for a new life for his family, and I've ended up doing that almost as a bit of a legacy to him as well. And he was a huge football man. He played semi-professional football in England and loved sport, and that's kind of one of the places where my love of sport came in. So I guess that's the kind of moment that I reflect on more often than not.
Yeah, as I'm sure as you get older, it's sort of the connection means a lot more. And thank you for sharing that moment. Obviously, not a great moment in your life, but there's some positives that have come from it over the course of your life. And as you said, you're living here in a beautiful country now, and the weather's, well, I don't know what the weather's like, but it's beautiful in Brisbane today. So it's a good place to be, and we're pretty sport obsessed too. So you're not a bad place to work.
It is. It's. I'm very fortunate to live here, and very fortunate to work in the industry here, and I really appreciate the kind of sporting landscape that we have here, and how much Australians love sport.
Now, I've got a new segment which is proudly sponsored and powered by our friends at Swyftx here in Brisbane, which is a crypto platform. They've got over 1.1 million users in Australia and New Zealand. It is the bucket list, and the bucket list is a question around the ultimate sporting event that you would love to attend that you have not attended thus far. Stuart, I'm interested in your bucket list sporting event.
This is hard. We've spoken about this at work recently. I'm very, very lucky that I've been to FIFA World Cups, the Rugby World Cup, as I mentioned before. I've Tour de France. I worked on when I was at SBS. I had Super Bowl kind of in my head, but I feel that's, given where I work, that's one that's probably going to be a bit more achievable for me to go to. So the one that, and I think it's part of getting older as well, I think it's the Masters at Augusta.
That's the second time that's come up, actually. I think after Rory's amazing tournament this year and the shakes that he had and the eventual success, the Masters has been on the bucket list.
I think so. It's just one of those events that it is unique. The same course, it just looks incredible. The traditions, everything about it is just such a one-off. And you look at sport around the world and you think, which of those events is that unique? And I think the Masters is probably one of the few that fits into that bucket. That it's always the same spot. It's always the same way. It always feels the same. You could watch a Masters broadcast from 15 years ago and look at one in 15 years' time, and it would look as sumptuous and wonderful and glorious, and it would look very similar each time. And it's a very aspirational kind of tournament. Just the idea that you turn up, you've got to put your phone in a locker and you don't get it for the rest of the day. You actually capture people's attention. And thinking about my job, having people not on their phones, it's a terrible idea. But for me to actually be able to like put that away and not worry about it and just consume what's in front of you. Just use your eyes for once and just take it all in, I think would be incredible.
I don't know how the actual viewing works, but do you pick a hole or do you wander or do you pick a player? What would you do?
I reckon I would wander. Well, depending on the day. I think if you went final day, you may want to pick a spot and stay, maybe aim in corner or something like that. But I think I would love to just wander because it just looks an amazing place to be. And that feeling of being on one hole and then you're hearing the cheers somewhere else, and then it's somewhere else as well, and it's that story. And again, you don't have your phone, so it's not like you're going to be live streaming it, or you're not going to be looking at the scores on ESPN.com. You're going to be actually experiencing the tournament as it's meant to be, as it used to be, as it will be in the future. And there's something old world romantic about that.
No, fabulous. That's a great bucket list, and hopefully one day you make it to Augusta and you can share that story with me. Stuart Randall, Managing Editor, Digital Video, Audio and Social at ESPN Australia. It's been a pleasure having a chat to you on Scoreboard, the podcast, and congratulations on what you've achieved at ESPN with all those improved metrics, etc., and the content that you produce, not only for American sports, but also, as you mentioned, at Australian sports and the peripheral products that come with that. And I look forward to catching up and following the progress.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it.